Hey, welcome back to We Be Kids again. My name's Danny, I'm one of the founders of We Be Kids. I'm an outdoor educator and a storyteller. If this is your first time at We Be Kids, check out our website. It's webekids.net. You'll see it just down here. And on our website, there are over 250 free resources for you and your family to use to inspire you out into nature, to connect with nature and improve your well-being. There's a whole range of things there, including 100 pre-recorded stories just like this one. Now, this story that I'm going to tell you today is a story from a long time ago. And it's a story from Great Britain. And this story is called The Rowan Prince. Now, a long time ago, the islands of Great Britain were ruled by a great king. And the king would often be off all across the country, fighting battles with those people trying to take his power. Now, England was very, very different to how you might know it today. Lots of the country was covered with thick forest. And it was in one of these thick forests where this story begins. You see, in the middle of the forest, there was a big circle of Scots pine trees. Big, tall, beautiful trees, green needles that stand out across the tops, creating a huge swaying canopy. And in the middle of this ring of Scots pine trees, there was a beautiful rowan tree. And this rowan tree was in full leaf. And on each of its branches, amongst its leaves, were beautiful heads of white flowers. It was springtime, and as the flowers bloomed, the insects buzzed around and the birds flew from tree to tree. And on this day, as the sun moved across the sky, its bright light shone down onto the rowan tree. And one of its sunbeams shot down onto an outreach branch. And on the outreach branch, there was a curled up bud. And as the sun touched the bud opened. And out from the bud, something tumbled and landed on the ground. A small bird flew down to look to see what it was, and it landed on a rock, and it peered into the long grass, and there, for the first time, it saw a beautiful baby born directly from the rowan tree. Now the birds flew around it for a little while, and it began to sing a beautiful, beautiful song. And as it sang, the sound of the song filled the glade where the Scots pines were. But suddenly a new sound appeared in the woods. It was the sound of galloping hooves. The bird turned to look, and there, riding through the forest, was a lady on a big chestnut brown horse. This lady had long green robes, and she wore a golden crown on her head. It was the Queen, and she was out patrolling the lands, making sure that they were safe and free of intruders. And as she rode into the glade, she saw the rowan tree, and she was stopped and mesmerised by its beauty. And as she stood and looked at the tree, she heard a sound. It was the sound of the baby down in the grass. She turned and she looked. She saw this baby boy, and she picked him up. She began to talk to him, and then she began to sing to him. She looked around, and there was nobody anywhere near. She thought how unusual it was, but she didn't want to leave the boy in danger. So she wrapped him in her robes, And she jumped onto the horse and she rode all the way back to the castle. When she got back to the castle, she placed the baby in a cradle. And she told that baby, sang songs and told stories. And for weeks and weeks and weeks, she treated that baby with all of the love of her own children. And then one day the king returned. He rode into the courtyard and he went into the castle, and the queen met him. And she told him about the baby that she had found in the forest. And the king came along and he looked at the baby boy. And they picked him up, and the three of them embraced in a beautiful hug. And the king and the queen agreed that they would raise this child like their own son. And they had a lot of experience at raising sons. You see, they had had 7 sons in the past. Sadly, none of them had survived. They'd all been killed in the brutal battles that had waged around Great Britain. And it wasn't long before the king had to head out to fight one of these great battles. And it was the queen who, through the child's early years, brought him up. Every day they would head out into the forest. She would tell him stories of the animals and the plants and the trees, and they would sing songs together, and they would play in the fallen leaves. And for many, many, many years, the queen kept the boy very, very close to nature. But on the eve of his 10th birthday, the king pulled the queen into the courthouse and he said, "The time has come for the prince to join us in our ways. Tomorrow on his birthday, he will join the hunters, for it is time for us to clear the forest so we can plant the fields." So on the next day, the king took the boy and he introduced them to the royal hunters. And the hunters took him out and they taught him how to stalk and track the wolves and the bears and the lynx and the fox and the badger. And over time, the boy became a great hunter. And he hunted for many years, until the eve of his 15th birthday. The king went to the queen and said, "The boy is now a great hunter. Now he must become a woodsman. It is time for him to learn how to cut the trees so that we can plant our crops." So on the next day, they took the son. They said, "Your hunting is over. Now you will train to become a woodsman." With that, he did. And with a great axe, he learned how to cut the trees, how to clear the forest. And he did this for many years until he was a master woodsman. And then on the eve of his 18th birthday, the king went to the queen and said, "He is a great hunter. He is a great woodsman. It is now for him to learn how to be a great farmer so we can grow all of the crops on our land." So on his 18th birthday, they took him out. And in the land where he had walked with his mother, he now planted crops where the trees had been cleared and the animals hunted. And he did this for a number of years until his 21st birthday. And on his 21st birthday, the king approached the queen. She said, "He is a great hunter. He is a great woodsman and a great farmer. Now it is his turn to become a great soldier. Tomorrow he will ride out with me into battle." And the queen was sad to hear this, especially given what had happened to her sons before. But she knew that she must follow the king's word. So on the next day, on his 21st birthday, the king took the prince. He gave him the royal armour, a royal shield and a royal sword, and he gave him a royal horse. And that day they rode out to battle. He rode out across the land. He passed the fields that he'd planted, the fields that he'd cleared, and there were no sign of any of the animals from his childhood. for each of them had been hunted to extinction. And onward they went, patrolling the edge of the lands until they came across a great mob. The king said to his son, "Draw your sword, the time has come." And the two of them rode into battle. And as they rode into the battle, the mob approached, and one of the mob knocked the king from his horse, turned on their own horse and shot off. Filled with rage and love for his father, the prince chased them. He chased them over the fields on his horse, over the hills, until they arrived at a forest. And the man from the mob rode into the forest on his horse, and the prince followed. And the prince followed them, and he got closer and closer until they arrived at a glade with a circle of Scots pine trees. The prince looked around. The man jumped from his horse and drew his sword, and the prince jumped from his. He drew his sword and he ran. He ran towards the other man, and he lifted his sword, but as he lifted his sword high up, a sunbeam caught the tip, and he dropped his sword. He wasn't sure why, but something had reminded him of this place. The sword fell to the ground. The other man saw this and turned and fled. And the prince dropped to his knees in the middle of the glade, the sun shining through, illuminating the edges. And he sat there with his head in his hands. And then he heard the sound of a bird. And the bird came flying over and it landed next to him. And he looked at the bird and he remembered something. And then the bird looked at him. And the bird spoke. The bird said, "You have returned. We have been waiting for you all of this time." And the prince looked at him. He said, "Returned?" He said, "I feel a sense of home here, but why?" And the bird said, "This is the place you were born. You were born here from the mother Rowan tree." And the prince stopped. He thought, "What has become of me?" He said to the bird, "Where is the mother Rowan tree?" And the bird said, "Not long after you were born, a great storm blew her down. And although she may appear to be gone, she is not. For her leaves and her bark and her trunk, it is in the soil beneath your feet." The boy said, "This is where I belong. Tell me, bird, how can I be back here in this place?" And the bird said, "First of all, prince, lay down your shield." And the prince laid down his shield. He said, "Now remove your armour." And the prince removed his armour. He said, "Remove those heavy boots." And the prince reached down and he took off the boots. He said, "Now remove your socks." And the prince removed his socks. And the bird said, "Take your feet and dig them into the soil, deep down into the earth." And he did. He curled his toes and he put them in amongst the earth. And the bird said, "Close your eyes and listen, for I will sing you a song. And I will sing throughout the night, and in the morning all will be well." And with that, the prince closed his eyes, and the bird began to sing. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I feel your heart beat. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I feel your heart beat. And the sun set, and the night came, and the moon passed across the sky. And in the morning, as the sun rose, a sunbeam came down, and it touched the very tip of a new, beautiful Rowan tree that sat right in the centre of that glade of Scots pines. And that's the end of the story. So I hope you enjoyed that tale. The story of the Rowan Prince. So all we ask is you share these stories far and wide. This is the 100th story that is now on Weeby Kids. So if this is your first one, you've got a long way to go to watch them all. So whatever you do today, I hope it includes an adventure out into nature. Thanks for stopping by at Weeby Kids, and we'll see you again sometime soon. Bye!